Welcome to Approaches to Listening. I'm William Taylor, and am joined today by Patrick Summers as we discuss the challenges of listening in a university music program. So in a music hall education, it seems like both no one and everyone talks about listening. Ensemble teachers say again and again, listen to your section, listen to those around you. Private instructors ask, hey, did you hear what just happened? And then, of course, there are these elements in a musical education, like going to recitals and concerts. So there's a lot of listening, but teaching the actual skill of listening, it's not very well fleshed out, which is largely the purpose of this podcast. So today we're going to dive into that some more to discuss why listening is so important and why it's so hard to do as a musician at a university. So Patrick, a few questions to throw out to start us off.
Okay.
We'll both have a chance to take them. So first, when did you learn to play instruments? When did you really learn to make music?
I started making music in middle school. We just moved from North Dakota. I tried to play the recorder and it didn't do very well in it. So I didn't think the music was in my future. But I started playing in middle school after we moved back. And I started on the alto saxophone because they needed an alto sax player. And I didn't want to do anything else or something. I forget.
Nice. So when would you say you really learned to listen to music? Because I think they're different things, playing instruments and really listening to music.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure when, but so I'll start. There's a picture of me as a child. I was naked, lying on the floor in front of a stereo or something. And I was listening to, my mom had put on classical music and I was sitting there eating butter and listening to classical music as a little like 2-year-old. So I know that somewhere in my past there's just been a fascination with the music and listening to it. So I think that is where it started. But I had a really good middle school teacher, band teacher, who ensured that he would take time to make sure that everybody self-corrects in the ensemble, if you want to call it what it was back then. But in middle school, not so fancy. But he'd make sure that everybody had a chance to self-correct. And if he would say like, so that was wrong. Who made a mistake? What happened? And then he would make sure that we all take accountability for the things that we did or didn't do. So I think that was the foundation of learning how to listen. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was thinking about the same questions for me because I started my piano lessons when I was like 5, and I would listen to music and like have a good time listening to it, but I was like largely reacting to the music. I didn't know how to engage with stuff that didn't just spark a reaction. And so about the time I was 14, my oldest brother sat me down and was like, you need to learn to listen to music, and gave me a lot of 20th century and avant-garde music. I was like, learn to listen to this, learn to appreciate it. And there was other stuff, more romantic, film scores, just good music in general. And I spent like a summer just like in my room, like listening to music. It was a really important time. And I remember that as like, wow, I really like to listen to music. And later, when I was about 18, I was in piano lessons at the university. And my teacher, Dr. Jones, he told me, he said, you should listen to yourself when you play. And I was like, are you saying I'm messing up and not noticing my mistakes? But he told me, he's like, just listen to what you're doing. And I found there was another level to listening. And that was really key because I started to find that there was more to music than I thought. And so I guess here's the third part of this question. So there's a time where you could identify, I learned to make music. And then you have your experience as a 2-year-old listening to music. I guess the third part of the question is, how are those two related in your experience?
Making music and listening.
Yes.
How are they related? Well, I would say that I would not be making music had it not been for listening to music. Because I found I'm a very selfish player, a selfish musician. So I don't do anything unless it's fulfilling for me. Um, Albeit I may be a good collaborative person. If it's not fulfilling for me, I don't like to do it. And so I think that listening to music and learning how to listen to it helped me to make music. So I think that's the easiest relationship for me, is that it's a symbiotic circle that one doesn't happen without the other. And I find that if I'm not listening to music on the regular and trying to expand my field of aural diversity, then I don't create the music that I'd like to. And I feel like things are just kind of stale. My skills don't go down, but things just aren't as lively and active in my mind as I'd like them to be. Yeah. So recently, actually, I started to force myself to listen to like odd things. Like, well, a couple years ago, it was like death step, like death metal mixed with dubstep, and it's really terrible stuff. But it forced me to listen to more. But that made me, and then I started listening to music while I practiced. So my ears would be hearing one thing, and then my hands would be doing something else, just to make sure that there was a disconnect between my hands and what's on the piano and what's going on in my head. So I'm not like going into rote presentation of what I'm practicing and what I'm hearing. It's just like kind of that staleness that just becomes rote. So I started listening to stuff and then doing my technical exercises, or actually trying to be expressive. And I started recording that to see like what the differences were. And there were minimal differences, but just the fact that it happened made it sure that things were maintained interesting. Things were interesting. Maintain that interest. That was kind of a tangent, but I found that there's a skill that I don't really have of listening to what I'm playing in real time. And that is I did record myself and then listen back, and that's been helping. That's a specific type of listening that's not active in the moment, though. You know what I mean?
I do. That's actually something I talk about in earlier episodes. Is I think the gold mine in listening is when you can be in the moment listening to your music. Because if you're really listening to music, and especially if you have a well-developed technique, the music will tell you what to do next and how to do it. It gives you energy, it gives you motivation, it gives you everything you want from music, but only if you're really listening. And there's different types of listening. In the podcast, I've outlined 4 specifics, but it's interesting for me thinking about how listening and performing are related. I find that when I stop really listening beyond like thinking right and wrong, it's like, am I taking in the music? Well, if I'm not taking in the music, what happens is I tend to just get focused on the future. And so I think about things like, is this good? Am I doing what people expect? Will this secure my reputation? Will this be like good audition material? And really pressure, instead of something like musical pleasure, is what I'm listening for. It's like, am I keeping the pressure off of me? Am I meeting those demands instead of creating art?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies, The Last Samurai, there's a a scene in there. Tom Cruise, the main character, plays this person who gets captured by the Japanese, and then because it's right at the cusp of winter, they bring him into their town, and he has to stay there for like months. He's trapped. Nobody can go anywhere because they're just trapped in the mountains. It's wintertime, and so he can't get down. So then he starts to like try to integrate with the society and the people there. Even though they were enemies at first, they then became really good friends and eventually fought for them. But one of the scenes is that he wants to learn how to use the katana, and so the samurai are out there training, and he stands up, and then so they start like making fun of him and like hitting him and beating him because he's an outsider and all that kind of stuff. But then he starts showing some acumen, and the trainer, the person who's in charge of training the samurai and keeping them fresh, says, "Too many minds, too many minds. Mind the grass, mind the wind, mind the sword, mind the head, mind the hands. Too many minds." And so then he starts to like, whenever he would do something, he would start to hit him where he thought that the too many minds was. But I think that's like a beautiful phrase to use, is too many minds. And in music, that's so true. Mind the fingerings, mind the music, mind the dynamics, mind the mistakes that you may make, mind the things that you have already made, mind the things. Too many minds, too many. You're just so dispersed and cerebrally and intellectually and creatively. They're all connected. And so if you're dispersed and spread too thin, like too much butter on toast or whatever that thing is called.
Right.
If you spread too thin, then how can you ever expect to improve your overall musicianship? It'll just never happen.
Right, and I think that the moment is the key to all those problems. Like, you have to find the moment, which is hard because you have to let go of those other thoughts. You need to say, I'm not going to address them. And I found that the moment really can only be accessed through feeling. If you try to think, you're already out of the moment.
Yeah.
It's like if you're performing a piece in recital, let's say, and you start thinking, you're always ahead or behind. You can't be right there.
Yeah.
With feeling, you can feel it out. And again, in earlier episodes, I talk about the relationship, and once again, this cycle of thinking and feeling, how they feed each other. But that moment is so important to make organic and lively music. I mean, especially in a day where we have Steinway sound banks that are massive.
Yeah.
They can make any noise you want on a piano. We have artificial intelligence, which is crazy. And so you tell it, hey, you need to make these type of sounds, or you can just program it by hand and be like, I need a flawless recording of this piece. A flawless, I don't know, can't even call it a recording if it's made using a sound bank. But it's interesting. We have the materials to make perfectly pristine music. But I think what is missing from that is the moment and the organic nature that comes when musicians, the organic nature of the music that will, I don't know, arise, I don't know what word you want to use, when musicians are in the moment, react to the moment, react with the audience, react with the sound, then they can create something that's truly live. It's the type of music that everyone all of a sudden is like, wow, something just happened. And that just doesn't happen without the moment. And that ties in really nicely to the next question, which is more specifically about universities and listening. So how well do you think universities teach listening to their music students? I'm not talking about how well the professors teach listening, but the program, the structure of the program, the pressure of the program. How do those do when it comes to teaching listening?
See, the pressure of the program, that's an interesting phrase right there, because there is a pressure in universities universally from professors and from your peers to do better. And
always,
exactly right. And so that's an interesting phrase to use because I think that the pressure to listen to music and to listen during a performance and to listen during practice and to listen, I think the pressure is there because everyone expects a performance to be perfect. Everyone expects the practice time to be
Efficient.
Everyone expects that if you're doing an ensemble, they're expecting rehearsal technique to be good, expecting you to be in tune or to know your instrument. So there's this pressure that's automatically there. So I found that very interesting. So how would that? I don't think that it translates though over to the curriculum. I was fortunate enough to start with jazz, and that very much, even though it's not in the curriculum, it's not like necessarily like you need to listen to this thing in this way to then take this away from it. But there's a natural, the way that you learn jazz is that you listen, you figure out what it's doing, you mimic it, and then you apply it, and then you expand it. That's the formula to learning how to do jazz. Listen, you figure out what it is, whether you transcribe it or whether you doodle on it on the piano or on your instrument, and then you mimic it in a real-time setting, and then you expand that. So in jazz, that's just expected. You're just expected to listen all the time. And that's apart from ensemble. That's apart from practice. That's apart from anything. You listen to music for the purpose of using it at your own disposal. And I think that. I don't think that that's empty in the classical realm or whatever like that. I don't think that I don't think that there's an emptiness there. I think that there's just a different approach that people use in that realm. And so as for both jazz and classical university curriculum, I don't think that there is a curriculum for it. I don't think that there is a specific class that's dedicated to listening for these reasons, or like listening at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't found it in the university that I teach at. That's not there. We have aural skills, but that's the closest thing that you'll ever get to listening to music specifically and intentionally, aside from being assigned it by your private instructor, you know?
Yeah, it makes me think, even when looking at a class like aural skills, I find that listening begins with analysis, which is thinking.
So as in like you're coming to this class, aural skills, from an analytical, is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
I think because universities, they need to measure your progress.
Yeah.
And so we start with a rubric that says you need to learn these things. And so I've seen, at least in my experience, that the pressure of the curriculum does factor into my listening. It factors into all the music. Because I go to aural skills, and it's like you will have a test where you'll hear a melody, and you need to figure out what the melody is and write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so then how do I do that? Well, I analyze it. I say, well, this is an interval. It went up a perfect fourth, then it went up a whole step, then it went up a minor second. I have to analyze it to write it down. I have to analyze it to feel secure that I can complete the rubric. And the same thing happens for music history. I need to know the facts. I need to be able to put them on a test come exam time. It happens in conducting. It's like, I need to make sure that I do this gesture just right. And there are elements of feeling in all of that, but largely I'm thinking about it. And the thing is, the more you think, the more you're out of the moment. Thinking I don't see a way that you can think and be like where your body is, where your feeling is, right then. You can be close, but not quite there.
Yeah, and I don't think that you mean that those things aren't important either.
No, not at all.
Like
not at all.
That's an essential foundation, and I don't think that you're getting to that at all. But just to make sure that people understand that it is useful, like all that stuff that is analyzing and analytical and
absolutely
groundwork is so essential. You can't be I'm sure you covered this in a different podcast, but you can't listen efficiently without analyzing efficiently and learning how to. If you don't have that foundation, there's nothing that you can put your listening skills up against. And so even though you may listen to music, like say you don't know a certain sound that's happening in the music, say you're doing some modern composition with a certain, I don't know, cellophane that has aluminum attached to it that's set on top of a piano. And if you hear that sound, then you don't know what it is, then you can't accurately or correctly listen to that sound because you don't know what it is. And so therefore, if you don't know what it is, then you don't understand how it can be reproduced and you can't apply it anywhere. So it's really just a static thing that happens. But if you understand what the sound is, then that becomes a malleable instrument that you have at your disposal, because then you understand it, you can put it somewhere, or you can just let it be free in your mind. I don't know. Does
Right.
that make sense? Yeah.
I do address this in earlier episodes, talking about the relationship between feeling and thinking. As far as I understand it, I would say both represent 50% of your interactions with music, if you want the most. And I also argue that if you over-focus on one, even if you master it to the best of your ability, say you just think about music, you don't delve into feeling at all, even if you spend all your time thinking about thinking, you will get far less than 50% of what music can offer.
Yeah.
Because feeling unlocks thinking and vice versa. And I think you're absolutely right that thinking lays the groundwork. It makes things repeatable, sustainable.
Yeah, good words.
And it does ground you, but feeling is what makes it alive, especially when integrated with the thinking. My goodness, they're a perfect combination. But in my experience, universities don't create space. Once again, I'm talking about the programs. They don't create space for feeling. Because how do you grade that? How do you evaluate that?
There's no metrics for that.
Are you feeling this? So sorry, you get a C because you're not feeling it enough. It's like, no, that doesn't work. So just music students need to understand the university will give you that thinking foundation, but you need to find where the feeling comes in, where the life comes into the music. And if you don't find that from a professor or from an ensemble that you form or from an outlet that just rejuvenates you or from your personal listening, then you end up being a really dry musician who can do everything to get A's.
Yeah, check the boxes.
Win auditions, maybe even get jobs, but your music doesn't reach its potential. And nor do you get the full things out of music that you could.
I like that you use the word space. I've been thinking about this a lot recently where I work. It's a liberal arts university, but the music program is still so demanding. And I think that there is, for me, what I'm trying to not develop, but what my thoughts are going through is that if there is space in the music program to not be technical, then that would provide an easier access point for students to inhabit the music that the professors want them to inhabit. They want them to become stellar musicians. They want them to create beautiful sounds, but they don't give any space, like you said, for that, because the curriculum that they've imposed on themselves and the students is so rigid and so involved that there is no space for that. And that could be because, like, people don't consider the arts as, like the greatest thing in the world, right? I mean, as in, like,
this could change humanity.
Yeah. Well, and people agree that it can, but like, if you tell your mom or dad when you're young and that you want to go in to be a musician for the rest of your life, they're like, okay, but maybe. So there's this thing that people associate with someone who's going to go do music, wants to do it as a profession, wants to go to it for college. Even I thought it was silly because I didn't go to college until later in life. I spent a decade doing freelance work outside of high school, and I thought college was stupid. I didn't see any need for it because I was making money. I was doing my thing. I was making music. So why do I need it? Come to find out, I was very naive about that, and it is essential for a good amount of people. But I think where the programs and the curriculum misses is giving space, and which could be replaced or given, or it could be a moment. That space could be listening curriculum, because that will make sure that the students are outside of technicalities, outside of the professor's expectations, outside of all this stuff, and just focusing on them in their moments of music making. And I think that would be really good thing to have in universities widespread. You know what I mean?
I agree. And that leads into the second part of this question. Where do you think universities fail or succeed best when it comes to teaching listening? And you've already mentioned this. You mentioned that the faculty want their students to be stellar musicians. And I think almost every faculty member I've worked with understands that listening is key to that. It's like, if you're not going to listen, you're going to be held back. But I do see that, just like you said, I think there's a failure in the space to experiment with that. I think of a teacher we both had, Dr. Robison, who would teach group voice, and he was so intent on people shattering their expectations of what they could do. And he didn't care if you made a mistake. He didn't care if you made awful noises. He's like, you don't think you can sing above this F. I am going to push you until you see that you can. And he's like, who cares what noise you make? We are shattering your conceptions of what you can do. And so there was a lot of ugly singing, but then there were those moments where people broke through.
Yeah.
And I think we all saw those. I think any member of his class, any number of his classes saw those moments where all of a sudden it was like, there's more than I thought there was. There's more to me than I thought there was. But if you hold too tightly on security, doing what the rubric requires alone, then you don't find those moments.
And I think that, and I don't think that it's only a student's fault. I think it is partially the professors or the curriculum makers, the decision makers when it comes to that kind of a thing, because they also do, and this is simply from a accreditation standpoint, simply from a university thing, very technical. The professors need to do certain things to make sure that they're in the curriculum.
Right.
And so, and a certain, and I think that's a double-edged sword, because I think a lot of professors want to do that thing, but they don't want to be seen. They don't want their students to then go do something, and then they're like, oh, well, that student's that professor is what am I saying?
That student studies with that professor.
Studies with that professor. And so none of the professors want to feel that. I don't. I mean, like, but nobody wants to feel ashamed or like they didn't do their duty in their role. And but if they just simply allow their students to make mistakes and allow them to have the time to listen in the rehearsal. I've been thinking about this recently, actually. It was a shower thought, I think, but if the job of a teacher, the job of a professor, especially in music, is not to give students anything. It's not to give them anything. It's not to shove anything down their throat. It's not to maybe portions of themselves they can give, but their duty is to inspire the student to bring something out of themselves. And so if you're teaching in such a way that is not doing that, then you are not completing your duty as a teacher to bring the life out of students. And I think that can be easily, it's not something that is easily changed, because it is a curriculum thing, and it's a thing that happens on the professor's side or the teacher's side, where they want to make sure that everything is exact and everything is perfect for the student. But your job is to inspire the student to bring something out of them. And I think that listening is an excellent way to do that. Take time in a lesson to to just have breathing space for a student to listen to what they just did, repeat it again, take the time to work on one single passage, because then the student will then begin to listen to that passage instead of just flying through it to make sure we get to the next one or whatever. That was a little bit of a tangent, but
No, I think there's a lot in there, because I feel students, there's this goal to get to the point, finish the project. It's like, I've done it. I've learned the piece. I've mastered the piece, meaning I can play it without mistakes. It's fully memorized, and no one could say you messed up. And so, that is antithetical to listening. I feel like that's very thought based, where it's like, oh, I've got it. But it's like in the moment, what if you do something different? What if your interpretation changes based on feeling, based on the moment and the crowd and what they want, how they're reacting? If you're not adept at being that flexible, then you're not going to make really live music. You can make good music. You can even make great music, but not the best. And so listening is the key to that. And without space given to the students from those in authority, from the teachers, they are hard pressed to find how to do that. I feel.
And it's unfortunate that just like culture and just like progress in culture, progress in sociality, some of it can't be quantized. Some of there are no metrics for it. And so it is difficult from a curricular standpoint to quantify or to set up a program that could be quantifiable or have metrics to it that is very subjective and very internal. So to no fault of anybody, but it does fall short because it's just an afterthought. The listening, the active listening for the purpose of integrating is not. It's just a side thought. It's just an expectation that should happen. But no student going into a curriculum or student who has been in a curriculum like Suzuki or whatever, since they're a child, they've just been going through rote curriculums their entire process. And so perhaps the listening could be started at a younger age, or maybe it could be that the listening is part of a curriculum instead of just an afterthought. Yeah.
So a question, do you think universities, with the restrictions you've laid out, they have to be accredited, they need rubrics, because you can't just be like, oh, we're just studying this totally open-ended. That's not helpful. That's super ungrounded.
Yeah, chaotic.
But do you think university programs can effectively teach listening at the end of the day?
Yeah, and it comes down to the teacher. I think that the listening element of all this has to come from an independent teacher's studio. I think that's where it starts. I don't think that it starts with a program that you can now just like lay on somebody. I think it has to be taught to a professor, and many of the times I'm sure the professors are willing to do something like that, as long as they understand how it will work, or that it won't like make them look bad, or that it won't compromise their own curriculum. I think that it has to come from an individual professor in a private studio lesson, or in a master class, or something along those lines, where everyone is in a position to give that space. So that's where I think that it starts, and that's right. And I think that the curriculum will follow, because we don't understand how to quantify it. I think it has to be explored, and we have to risk something to find out how to quantify it, and how to give metric to it, and how to give curriculum to it. But I think it has to start on an individual level, with the professor experimenting and risking 10 minutes of their private lesson with the student to do something with it. And that may become a point of theorizing, theoretical. It may become a part of subjectivity. It may become ephemeral. It may start with something that is just out of reach. but that's the risk I think that all musicians should have anyways, whether you're in a curriculum or a university or whatever.
Right.
You should have an element of let's do something stupid, or let's do something out of my norm. Why don't we play this piece 70 clicks faster and see what the heck happens, or let's just play it as a larghissimo and see what happens, see how you can expand the taffy of sound. You know what I mean?
No, we literally use the word play to interact with any instrument that's not voice. Vocalists sing, everyone else says, I play this.
Interesting.
But it's rarely reflected that you are actually playing. And if you want more, well, you want something new, different, then you need to try things that you haven't tried. And so this seems a silly, maybe banal question, but I think it's worth asking, and I think it's worth any musician coming up with a well fleshed out answer to this question. How important is listening as a musician?
Yeah, that's kind of a general question, but I'll just go from my perspective anyways. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
I get my playing, my performance, my connection to music gets very stale if I don't actively listen. And whether that's in a practice room, whether that's me looking over the shoulder of one of my students, whether that's me at home cooking some dinner and I just throw on something, and whether that's me sitting down with my fancy headphones and listening to some high definition sounds. If I'm not doing something like that, I find it just gets stale. Now, granted, for me, one of my arguments that I always made to justify me not listening to music was that I do it for a living. I do it as a job. I, like this semester, I have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are, until the end of March, are 10 to 10 days. Students playing piano and then go to do music directing for the musical. 12 hours of just straight music. There is ear fatigue, and we all know that. People have ear fatigue. We get that. And so there is time where I do not listen to music, but I use that as a justification to not listen to it. And I think it is important to listen because for me, I find that my musicianship, my rehearsal technique, my ability to teach people principles that I think that they need to understand, that all gets stale if there's not this vibrancy of sound going through my head that is for my own pleasure and for my own enjoyment. So if I don't do that, then everything becomes stale. And for any musician, whether it is jazz, whether it's classical, whether it's rock, whether it's you're getting into like reggae, or if you're getting into worship music, whatever it is, if your ears aren't connected to your brain and you're not listening, even in your rehearsal or performance or outside of that, then you can lose the passion eventually. It'll just go away. That's what will happen. And if you lose, and that doesn't happen in a day, it doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen, it's just step by step, little by little, a breeze here and a breeze there. One snapped twig here, one snapped little leaf that falls here. The seasons change over weeks. And so your musicianship will change so subtly that you'll just find one day that it's just not there. And then it's harder to get back to that point where you felt that you were at your prime. It's difficult to get back there once it's gone, because your heart gets hard, your ears get hard, your brain gets hard. Things just get hard. And so you have to wet it down, heat it up, mold it back into the thing that you once thought was the best version of you.
Well, there's so many ways that you can practice in that hardness or that roteness that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's easy to do it.
It's so easy. And you're like, well, I need to practice every day.
Exactly.
Maybe I need to practice 4 hours every day.
And that's what my professors say, curriculum says too. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you stop listening within that, you can get really good at doing the thing, but you're not getting anything back. And if you're not getting anything back, what comes out essentially will eventually just dry up.
Yeah,
And
that's that relationship. Hmm.
no, it's a sad cycle, and it just doesn't work long term.
It doesn't. And the fix for me was always listening to things that I didn't used to listen to, practice things I didn't used to practice, be silly in practices, try something different. That's the best way that I've found it gets back to where I'd like it to be, is just doing something that's out of the norm. Um, like in any relationship, if you find it getting stale and stagnant and like the love is gone, then the only way that you can get that back is to spark those things again. And to spark those things, you have to do the things that are unexpected. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and isn't it interesting? I think everyone who studies music, especially seriously, began by listening to music. They had a moment, they had an experience where they're like, that's incredible. I want to do that. I want to make stuff like that. There's so many stories where it all began with listening, but then that listening tapers off. And I think you're exactly right, where it's like, oh, well, I do it every day. I'm always listening. Like going back to my piano teacher, where he's like, you should listen to what you're doing. It's like, what do you think I've been doing? I've been reacting. I've been
I'm a
adjusting.
music major.
Exactly. But yeah, it's so easy to stop the real listening, to have it become one-dimensional. And my first episode, I lay out 4 approaches to listening, hence the podcast's title. And man, if you get stuck in one approach, one way, especially if it's super critical, you're really integrating pressure into your art. I had a teacher who I was cramming for a recital during my master's degree, and he was like, no, practice slowly, practice happily. He's like, you don't want to practice anxiety into this difficult section. And you can practice boredom, duty, you can practice anything into your music. And what you practice into it is going to show up when you perform it. And so you really got to bring what you want to give.
Yeah, and you have to practice what you want to give.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you don't listen, then I don't see how that practice could remain live.
Yeah, you have to listen to what you want to give. So that means you have to explore. You have to explore. If you want to produce your best results, then you have to explore with the sounds that other people make to then see what kind of integration you can make. That's an interesting thought.
So here's a quick recap of these 4 filters that I have. I have 2 feeling filters, 2 thinking filters. And when you can harmonize all 4, that's music. That's as good as it gets. So the feeling filters are experience. How does the music, what experience does the music bring to you? And so if you're using that filter, you're actively listening to music and you're not thinking, just like, what do I feel? What do I feel in my body? What does this make me want to do? And then the other feeling filter is exploration, where you let go of what you know, you widen your perception, and you're just like, you zoom out. Just what's here? What could be here? What should be here? I mean, it's just zooming out, starting with a blank canvas.
Yeah.
You know, imagine approaching a piece that you've practiced 100 hours and just say, what's here? You know what's there, but what if you can set that aside and like imagine playing the Pathetique Sonata for the first time? What a bold statement.
Yeah.
Just a huge C minor chord right at the start. It's like, ooh, can you go back to that freshness where it's like, this is a journey instead of this is a standard that everyone knows, so I have to play it perfectly because everyone knows it and they'll know every mistake.
Yeah.
So those are the feeling filters. And then the thinking filters are analysis, which you've already talked about, and critique. And I think too often university, academic musicians, be they faculty or students, focus far too heavily on analysis and critique. And you can look at any interaction and be like, a lesson, we do, 30% critique, 70% analysis. Jury, almost 100% critique.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and so if you don't mix in the feeling with the thinking, you just, it's like the teeter-totter that just gets stuck on one side, and you don't have balance, you don't have motion, you don't have life.
That's the thing. It's the motion. I think that's a great analogy. The teeter-totter. I don't think that it's. I don't think that music is meant to be. This will sound odd, but there is thought behind it. I don't think that music is meant to be balanced. I don't think that there is because balance means there has to be. You need to know both sides. You need to calculate both sides, and you need to give both sides their due in order to ensure they're both there for you at all times. I don't think that that's essential. I think it's important to understand how to create it, but I think that unbalanced music that has this edge to it, is the exciting stuff. So maybe performance leans into a technicality, like the technical exercises at one point, so that we can like enjoy just like the rapidity of a section, or like we can enjoy the flurry of just practice. We can see that we can see you practicing 1,000 hours for that passage. We see the history that you've made with that section. I think sometimes that can be very exciting.
Yeah.
But then it goes over into this portion where it's feeling, and then the listener can just like feel the newness. They can just feel something coming out of the music that they haven't felt before, and perhaps the performer hadn't felt before. But I think if a student can understand how to make an unbalanced section or a piece of music unbalanced in a good way, then that becomes very exciting. And I think that in a university, maybe this is for any future students, I think that it's important to find somebody who can help you become unbalanced in your music. To find someone who can not just critique you, because it's easy to find students at a university, especially the higher up ones, that it's just like, oh, you played that passage wrong. Yang Langling didn't do it like that, or like Martha didn't do it like that, or like these pianists didn't do it like that. You should do it this way because they're the best. You should just do what they do. It's easy for you to find friends who are like that at university. They can all be critiques because we're all taking the curriculum. But if you can find someone that is that can be like, so what? You play it that way, that's great. What is it? Is it the best? I don't know. Why don't you just like do something different though? Why don't you try to play this with more rubato? Maybe you can set something different. Maybe you can, I don't know. But finding someone, and whether that's a teacher or a peer, I think that's essential for the music growth, musicianship growth.
No, I completely agree. I actually do like the word balance, but I think that too many people think of balance as, let's go back to the teeter-totter, it's just level. Neither side is touching the ground, and it stays that way.
Yeah.
But to have a teeter-totter, you go all the way down on one side, all the way down on the other side.
And that's when it's fun.
Right. And so to achieve a balance means constantly shifting the weight or the emphasis. And so if you stop doing that, that's no good.
That shift.
It gets rote. And I mean, there's never been, in my opinion, a worse time for rote musicianship because of recording technology and the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, it's already been done.
It's already been done. And you can hear that it's already been done.
You have Horowitz's recordings. You have Zimmerman's recordings. You have Thibaudet recordings. You have all these great recordings. And it's like, could I top that? It's like, no, you're not going to top Thibaudet. You're not going to top Horowitz. You could bring something unique. You could bring something live to an audience.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's what,
listen to do that.
And that's what audiences. So you have audiences that pay for the big names. You do. You have them, but like those are nearly the exceptions, because there are plenty of audiences that pay to just hear music, and there's a market for that, no matter what. Even if there's going to be a celebrity that is like the genius of all, that has the best performance, the best technique, the best interpretation, the best of everything, they can only fill so many concert halls. And so many, and there's a vast amount of audience that wants to hear music. And so there's always something that an audience wants from you.
Mhm.
And it's simply you. It's not anybody else. Maybe they'll compare you to those people. But they pay to see you, not anybody else. So I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think that, when we compare ourselves to them and that we think that we have nothing of value to offer. I think it's just a disservice.
No, I think it's...
And then maybe if you were to listen to yourself more, maybe this is an interesting thought. Maybe if a student were to listen to themselves more, they become more confident in what they can create and produce.
Well, that ties into the penultimate question really well. What is your best listening tip? And this could be for just any musician, period. How do you listen well?
Oh, how do you listen well?
I can go first.
Go ahead, yeah.
Again, for me, you have to be a flexible listener. You have to have different ways of listening to things. I struggled with this so much as a teenager. I found how to analyze and critique really deeply. And I mean, you knew we were friends back then. I'd approach pop.
Yeah.
And I'd analyze it and critique it. And I'd say, it sucks.
Yeah.
And you suck as a listener for listening to this.
You're not doing yourself any favors.
Right. But I didn't have these different filters to see music through. And I would really approach music one way. And that's just so restrictive. There's so many genres. There's so much diversity in what music can offer you. Do you need something to help you run? Well, you're not going to be analyzing your running music.
No, yeah, there you go.
That's a waste of time, in my opinion. It's like, no, you're gonna take the feelings it gives you, and use those to have a good run, amplify your physicality.
Yeah.
And so, for me, my best listening tip is you need flexibility in your listening. You need to have different approaches. Once again, the title of the podcast. That's why I made the podcast, because if you can become a flexible listener, one, you get more from the music you know.
Yeah.
You can get different things from the music you've listened to for 10, 20, or 50 years.
Yeah.
And especially for performers, if you know how to listen, who knows what you could give your audience? Nobody knows.
Good point.
The moment will tell you what you can give them, and then your audience will be there to find out. But it's so exciting if you have that flexibility. Yeah.
So I think that to piggyback off of that, I was fortunate enough to have the drive to try to make my life as a freelance musician, which forced me to be part of a rockabilly band, a top 10 hit band, swing, barrel house, and then chamber groups, and then we had like jazz rock fusion, and then I was part of like all these different bands, and then I was involved in the community college with musicals. I was involved with the very talented professor that's over there. We just called him Doc, but he was incredible. Everyone loved him, and I had an opportunity to accompany some of his voice students and be a part of his vocal groups and choirs, and so like I got this wide array of music that I had to do because I wanted to be a freelance musician. I didn't want to do anything else aside from paving my own path with my passion. And so I had an excellent opportunity to listen to so many and be a part of so much different music. And so piggybacking off of what you said, I think it is essential to be flexible in what you listen to. And for me, the tip that I would give was that you would listen for the purpose of reproduction. That's what I would tip off. I know it comes from a certain side of the teeter-totter thing. It comes at a certain side of the listening portion. But I think that that's the easiest way for me to bridge the gap between brain and spirit, is that you listen for the intent of stealing, and then you reproduce it, and then you find out how it translates into yourself. So in that regard, it is an active listen sequence to where you are actively finding things that you can then take into your own musicianship, specifically to be to reproduce. But then if you're a good musician and you have good teachers and if you have a good passion and good drive, then that reproduction of that sound or that passage or whatever, that way of sound will become your own, and then you can expand on it and you can explore with it.
Right. And as long as you keep listening, as long as that doesn't turn off ever, that'll happen. I don't see any way that you could connect to music optimally without listening. And there's different aspects. There's, of course, what happens in the ear. There's what happens in the body. There's what's happened in the mind and in the heart. But without listening, music dries up. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
The last question is about my thesis statement for the podcast. And I just want to know what you think about it. If you think it's accurate, if it's bunk. And the thesis statement is, how you listen determines what you hear. What you hear determines what you feel and think.
I think it's a good thesis, because I'm going to go outside of music for a second just for that, because I think that is a good thesis. One of my favorite Sondheim lyrics is, pretty isn't beautiful. Pretty is what changes. What the eye arranges, that is what is beautiful. Perspective is an essential part of living in any society. And if you don't value perspective, then you lose out on being a part of something bigger than yourself. So to this thesis, what you do here is your perspective on no one else is hearing what you're hearing. The sound waves may be the same, but your interpretation of those is what is beautiful. What your ear arranges is the thing that makes your musician. And so if you don't have that perspective, and if you don't have that perspective and you aren't listening actively to find out how you listen, that sounds really strange, but then you won't ever become the musician that you want to be, because you'll never be able to arrange your musical thoughts in such a way as to produce them in the way that your heart really wants them to. That sounded really sappy and dumb, but you have to listen. And I think that there should be a world where professors and peers inspire you to listen, not teach you to listen, but to inspire you to listen. And if that can become the curriculum of inspiration, is the thing that drives music and teaching, then there'll be plenty of opportunities for students to arrange their thoughts in such a way as to become their own musician. So I think your thesis is great, because it ensures that everybody seeks after a perspective that is unique to themselves.
No, and it's exciting to me that I just believe this idea that you can change what you hear without changing what is being said or presented in music. Yeah. It's like, no, you just need the tools to listen. And that applies to music. That, of course, applies in relationships. It applies everywhere. Yeah. Where your approach determines ultimately what you take in. And I think the first step to that is listening. So, agreed. How you listen determines what you hear. What you hear determines what you feel and think. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.